We're starting off once again. It is 12:08 on November 18th, 2021. This is Kinosethic. I think number one. I think this is the episode 1. Haven't done one of these in a while. Been preoccupied with other things. And so I have watched a fair few movies between, I think the first one was on No Time to Die, the James Bond film, and Lamb. And since then I've watched a fair few movies in the theater. And I've watched movies elsewhere, but I think I want to keep this to relatively current movies. Like I've watched a lot of older stuff. I watched the Carol Reed, Graham Greene written The Third Man, starring a few people that I've never heard of before, but also Orson Welles. And that one I got out of an essay, Peter Woolen essay about it. It was about Spiv movies, I suppose, but there was very interesting information about the consulting on that particular film, elements of the United States, which helped to facilitate some consulting and the like, which was all very interesting sort of info. But I watched that movie. I watched His Girl Friday, Howard Hawks movie. Which was a very funny movie, based on a play. I think a lot of movies at that time were based on plays, especially like, your Hawks and Ford maybe as well. Those kinds of like big like 40s guys, because I'm sure like, specific screenwriters were kind of scarce at that time. But it was based on a play, and there's only like 3 sets. There was like the press room of it was like the newspaper office of, I think that was Cary Grant. I think Cary Grant is in that movie. It's like Cary Grant's newspaper office, and then there's a scene with like the new husband and there's a scene with like the new husband and but I guess like the fiance, Cary Grant, and I guess her name is Hildy Johnson. a scene early on with those three characters at a restaurant, and then there's the press room at the prison, and like there's also a set like of a jail, but it's like shown very briefly, and it's like the majority of the movie is like 3 sets. So it really does work kind of as like a 3-act play kind of thing. So yeah, I was watching that, and like, the cinematography isn't like, it's obviously limited because it kind of looks like a television show with how like limited the scope of the, but the performances are just so like ridiculously good. Everyone is like bang on. Sound design is great. Being able to like, I guess the mix is really good. Sound design is like whatever, because sound design in all those movies is sort of like, limited on a certain level, but yeah, the sound design is limited on a certain level, but the mix is fantastic in that movie. Great movie. It's a bit, well, I would say it's pretty good as far as like a movie like that could go, I guess. My head right now is filled with like French New Wave stuff, so, and this Cahiers Cinema guys did not take well to they wanted pure cinema, right? And an adaptation of a stage play is not, I don't think, would qualify as pure cinema from their perspective. Anyway, the 4 films that I'll be talking about today are as follows. The big ones on the docket, the ones that I probably have the most to talk about, is Last Night in Soho by Edgar Wright, directed Edgar Wright, and Eternals of Marvel Studios fame, directed by Chloe Zhao. That was weird. I hope that picked up on the mic. Very funny. Those are the 2 that I want to talk about, but before that I will just briefly mention I did watch The Last Duel and The French Dispatch. There have actually been a lot of that's one interesting thing about kind of like the current climate of, I guess, like movie releases right now, is that like a lot of this stuff has been kind of like trickling out for the past like few months. Has been trickling out for the past like few months, and I suspect it is mostly, or not mostly, but it's like a lot of this stuff was shot like before the shutdown, or like maybe partially shot before the shutdown, in some level of post-production, whatever, right? Like obviously affected, and then, you know, they probably finished it like a year and a half ago, right? But it's like, we can't release it, especially not something like, say, The French Dispatch, or, I mean, probably more so like foreign films, or films that are gonna like make money in some like hypothetical, you know, foreign market, or just where like the money is gonna come from. You know, you can't really dump it on the streaming services. It's not a big enough movie, so it's like you need the ticket sales. So a lot of films have been like shelved, you know, have been put, you know, into the vault until such a time until such a time where ticket sales have like bounced back, and it's okay to go out to the movies. It's really fucking. It's okay to go out to the picture shows, right? It's stopping us from going to see the lights. But now that theaters are mostly at full capacity, like going to Cineplex, like I don't even think they give a shit about like where you're sitting anymore, right? Like you can sit next to people, it's fine. When you go to like plug in where you're sitting, it's like, yeah, just wherever. So there's that. And so now these movies are coming out. So there's like, for the past couple weeks, there's been like a big run of like, The Last Duel is a Ridley Scott movie. Then you had like, I guess Dune came out, even though I don't know how shelved that movie was in particular. Yeah, French Dispatch is a Wes Anderson movie. Edgar Wright, Last Night in Soho. So, and then in November, I don't exactly know when it's coming out, but there's supposed to be a Paul Thomas Anderson movie that's coming out soon. So it's like, you know, I mean, there's a fair amount of like pretty big guys. I mean, Steven Spielberg has West Side Story coming out soon. And again, I don't know exactly how much that movie was shelved either. So it's like, there could be a lot of like, well, you know, this movie's production wasn't held back that much, but for certain movies it does seem pretty clear that this was a movie that was shot like 2 years ago or whatever, edited probably a year ago or whatever, and that the people are just now seeing it. But yeah, The Last Duel, period piece, set in, I think, like 14th century France. Adam Driver, Matt Damon, Ben Affleck in a role as well. It kind of, is a very like Yojimbo type of flick. Yojimbo being the Akira Kurosawa movie about a crime that's committed. I believe it's similar. It's like the rape of a wife. I think this is literally just like Yojimbo. I would have to like watch Yojimbo again, brush up on it maybe. But this is obviously no Yojimbo, obviously. I thought it kind of sucked. Like, I don't know, it wasn't awful. It wasn't like insulting, I guess, but I think that like it was just bland. I don't know. Yeah, I guess I would just say it was a bland film. Didn't do a lot for me. I guess the performances were good. And there's obviously like, one of the things that sort of weirded me out was, so it goes through Matt Damon's story, and Matt Damon is like, I shouldn't really get into it too much. I just want to like briefly mention that I did watch it. But I think one of the interesting things to me was that I almost don't really want to comment on this because I just don't know like the history or like what sources they checked or whatever, but the film itself made a definitive claim to truth in that like the woman was right about the whole thing. So it shows like Matt Damon's perspective and then Adam Driver's perspective, and then it shows the truth of the matter, which is a little bit of both and also neither. So it's like it's an interesting film, and I guess you could say it's a little bit bold for him making like such a declarative statement. But yeah, and someone else who cares could, look at all the Me Too kind of, could examine it from the lens of like the Me Too, and also especially like how big that stuff was a couple of years ago. Again, I don't really know when this movie was shot. I assume it was shot like before the pandemic, and so that probably informed some of the decisions made by the filmmakers. But again, like I also don't know what history they read or like what. It's based off a book. The reason why it's called The Last Duel is obviously because it was the last duel to the death in French history. It was the last like trial by combat decided in France's history. So yeah, I mean the movie kind of makes like a declarative statement, very verbally. It kind of just like spells it out in a title card, but which a little bit of a not very subtle, but again, I think that the movie wanted to make it clear that they were on the side of the wife, and I suppose in that they succeeded. The French Dispatch, Wes Anderson's new film. As far as live action Wes Anderson movies go, it's a live action Wes Anderson movie. It's like of his sort of style. This one is interesting in that his last few have been, like his movies are always, I think have always been kind of, admittedly I have not watched all of Wes Anderson's films, but his movies have always sort of been, at least from what I've seen, have always sort of been episodic, I suppose. Lots of tableaus and like novellas and stuff. Novella-esque portions that kind of make up the totality of the film. And this one sort of gave a more like, I guess, clear structure to that kind of thing. it kind of like showed you up front, like, okay, this is, it was like one recipe section, one travel, a travel guide, and then like 3 articles. And I think that's what the sections of the film were. Maybe there were 2 articles, and one of the articles was like an obituary for Bill Murray. But the movie was solid, I suppose. The movie was solid, I suppose. And maybe I would like it. It blended a lot of, there was a little bit of stop motion in there. There was elongated animated action sequences, which I guess were there for style, maybe also for budget. Budget considerations. And that's, I think, there was a little bit of, I can't believe I'm blanking on this movie right now, this movie title right now, but his second stop-motion animated feature, the one with the dogs on the island, I cannot believe I'm blanking on the name, but that had a little bit of 2D animated sections when there was someone on the television. And of course, there's always the cyclical, repetitious characters in Wes Anderson movies, lots of his specific archetypes. Timothée Chalamet plays basically the horny philosopher, the kid from Moonrise Kingdom, obviously, and this sort of a mixture of the two kid foxes from Fantastic Mr. Fox, and he has a young girl in a motorcycle getup, which is reminiscent of a lot of the sort of hard-faced girls that populate, I guess, Wes Anderson's boyhood fantasies. I don't know. The man is gay. The man is a pervert. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I gave it I like it because it's Wes Anderson kind of movie. It didn't I think I probably like Grand Budapest more. But yeah. It did have some really good sequences in it though. The stuff with that's not Antonio Banderas, is it? Who the fuck was that? The art sequence, the art sequence was very nice. Though I will admit, I was a little bit distracted in my viewing of that movie, so I'm not 100% sure of my feelings on it. Yeah, that was The French Dispatch and The Last Duel. I guess I recommend both movies. The Last Duel was I don't know why you would go to see that movie. It's very sort of whatever. If you have an interest in that period of time, I guess. If you want to see what Ridley Scott thinks of Yojimbo, maybe go check it out. But yeah, can't say I was particularly enamored by it. And French Dispatch, if you like Wes Anderson, you're gonna like this movie. So whatever. This isn't really about recommending stuff. It's more just about my thoughts on it and if I have anything to say about the movies. So let's get on to something that I have a little bit more to say about. And it mostly has to do with them in connection with each other. I actually probably have very little to say about either of these movies in kind of isolation. But starting with Last Night in Soho, directed by Edgar Wright. I don't have any background information on these movies because I don't really give a shit at this point in time. But Edgar Wright, his last movie was Baby Driver, which I always liked that movie. I always thought it was pretty fun. And it was has a really strong first like hour, and then just kind of falls apart when there's not really a clear villain or any kind of like it kind of just rushes to the end and just sort of says like, whatever, this is fine, we'll just put this here and this is good. But it really is sort of, I guess, like just a love letter to, not a love letter, but it's an excuse to shove a bunch of songs that Edgar Wright likes into his movies, which he also does in this one to sort of an annoying level. I guess with Baby Driver, it's like, okay, there's sort of a excuse for this to be here because he's listening to music all the time, so like the audience kind of, you're trying to Eisenstein them into thinking that they're Ansel Elgort in this movie. But with Last Night in Soho, it's just kind of like, I just like music from the 60s. So I'm just like British music from the 60s, so I'm just gonna dump it all in here. Who gives a shit? And Baby Driver sort of had, as opposed to this movie, a lot of people sort of taking from like Last Frame of Painting have often sort of latched on to his cinematographic prowess. And Last Night in Soho, for whatever reason, in my opinion, didn't really offer a lot as far as, it didn't really offer that much in that department. It was actually turned out to be quite a special effects heavy film, which was sort of interesting in its own right. But the film is basically just about a girl who, throughout the film, it's never clearly explained, which is, you might think is part of the course for a Edgar Wright film, but actually I would say that it's more unusual in his kind of films, because usually in his kind of films there is some kind of like weird shit that's going on, but it's usually explained in such a ridiculous or ridiculously banal fashion that it kind of the end of the movie is often a large anticlimactic dispelling of any kind of interesting, occulted, supernatural element that the film might be running, and usually it sort of twists your conception of the sort of magical realism or supernatural element that it might be trafficking in. So this movie kind of kept its magical realism or like psychosis element or whatever sort of like hidden, in the sense that the main girl can, I guess, see ghosts, and ghosts of people close to her, or it kind of muddles it, sort of, because I mean, initially she sees her mother, and her grandparents sort of know about it, so maybe it's a thing. And it's also implied that her mother kind of suffers from a similar affliction, which made her go crazy and kill herself. And so she lives like out in the country with her grandparents. She wants to go to London to become a fashion designer. And she gets into this like art school in London. And she has really shitty roommates in her dorm. So she gets a new apartment in a very old house with a sort of eccentric landlady, I suppose, but whatever. And she starts seeing visions of this girl that looks kind of like her, not really, who's played by Anna Taylor-Joy. I think the main girl is like a newcomer, but she'll probably be in everything for the next 10 years and no one will know why. And then someone on Twitter will say, this bitch is like her family like invented killing Somali children. And you're like, what? That's crazy. She's just in all my favorite British movies. And all my favorite American movies now too. And it's like, yeah, she was in that movie called Saving Taiwan. Yeah, and her parents like invented, her parents are actually Belgium, and they invented Congolese concentration. Like, bro, that's fucking insane. I never knew that. Yeah, but anyway. She has shitty roommates, goes to the old house, starts seeing Anna Taylor-Joy. Anna Taylor-Joy is like this person that she kind of wants to exemplify. She's very like elegant, she's got great clothes, she's a singer, she's like starting out in the entertainment biz in Soho. Because I mean, this is my ignorance, but I was confused. I thought Soho was a New York thing, and I guess it's also a London thing. I have no idea what it stands for, and I don't really care. I don't give a shit. You know, Anna Taylor-Joy was a singer, and then it kind of just goes further in, and it kind of just gets into the sort of exploitative malaise of the entertainment industry. This is sort of another like Me Too kind of movie, though that specific angle gets a little bit warped towards the end, because as she's going further into these visions she's having when she's asleep with Anna Taylor-Joy, she starts to realize that like things have become really bad for Anna Taylor-Joy. She's kind of being exploited by the guy who played the Doctor. I think this guy was a Doctor Who. Anna Taylor-Joy basically just becomes like a high-end escort. And the girl in 2019 or whatever it's supposed to be gets a job at a bar. She starts seeing this old man who she thinks is the pimp from her visions. Come back to like, or you know, who's like preying on her now, or who just needs to get justice or whatever. And then eventually at the end of the movie, she ends up finding out that her landlady, who I guess goes by like a different name, or you never hear her full name. She's like the same girl from her visions, and she actually killed the pimp and killed a bunch of guys who she solicited for sex, or you know, who solicited her for sex. She killed a bunch of them, and I guess like hid them in the floorboards, or like that whole the ending sequence of the movie is basically like she's trying to escape. She's like basically killed the old guy, who turns out to be not the pimp, because the pimp obviously died when the landlady killed him in like 1960. He turns out to be a cop who is just like, who is in like one scene of the movie. He doesn't come back, but he's just a cop who's like, just like, you know, checking shit out, I guess. And then, you know, 6 years later or whatever, or yeah, I guess about 6 years later, he's just an old guy at a bar, and he dies when she like kind of pushes him into traffic, or forces him into traffic, whatever. He walks out into traffic, whatever. He dies, and then she's trying to escape London with her like the black boyfriend, who's been like the only person who's been nice to her in London, because all of her roommates are bitches and whatever. She's trying to escape with her black boyfriend, who wears whiteface in the movie at one point, which is pretty racist. Wearing whiteface is not cool, guys. Even if you're trying to be a ghost as a black person, it's not cool to wear whiteface. Trying to escape with them, she goes back to her room to kind of like get her stuff and tell the landlady that she's ditching. And then the landlady's like, you've brought the cops over and they're poking around and I'm not going to jail, missy. So she's like trying to kill her. And then like, she drugs her. So she drugs her and like, is I guess gonna leave her for dead, and then like the boyfriend comes to check, and then like he gets stabbed, and it's like it's very violent. It is very like Edgar Wright-esque, because usually he does have these sort of like over the top violent escapades, but a lot of it for him is like kind of undercut because he kind of like goes too big too early. Like the guy gets stabbed like right in the chest, like probably his lung punctured, right? And it's like, okay, he's dead, right? But he's like, he just lies there in a burning building for like 15 minutes of the movie. It's pretty insane to be honest. Yeah, then the house gets set on fire, and then like all the ghosts of like the dead guys that Anna Taylor-Joy killed are like coming out of the walls and out of the floorboards and like grabbing onto everybody, and then she comes in and she's like, I'm gonna kill you, and the ghosts are like, kill her, it's like, help us. And then it's like, what is the message here? Because you think it's like, okay, we're supposed to be rooting for the landlady because she kills all these guys, because throughout the entire movie we've been showing is like very predatory and like, you know, disgusting and lecherous and violent, and like a product of this like fucked up world where, you know, all these promises were made to her. And you know, there's one scene where she sings for this guy in like a nightclub and she's all excited, and then that's where the visions kind of turn, because the next vision after she sings is this is showing you that what she was actually auditioning for is like a backup dancer in like a burlesque kind of like stripper, sort of like a high-end kind of stripper vibe place. And then after that it's more almost like explicit prostitution and things like that, which kind of lead her down this like more destructive path, I suppose, and she kind of just gets suckered in more and more. Yeah, what I specifically wanted to talk about is less so like the whole plot and stuff, and like less so the, I don't want to say implications, but just like the bare mechanics of the film, but more so like the set pieces and the dressing on the film, which, although I'm not like a huge fan of or whatever, they're quite extravagant. They're quite like put together, and they're sort of novel. Like, well, there was one where, as the house is like burning down, the main girl is being pursued by the landlady up the stairs, and the landlady's got a knife and everything, and it's very like Psycho. I got like huge Psycho vibes. Which is probably very appropriate because it's a movie that's sort of like aping off a lot of like 60s stuff, and I think Psycho was in the 60s. I think Psycho was like 1960. I could be fucking wrong about that, but you know, Hitchcock, big British director and all that stuff. So there's lots of that kind of stuff in there. There's lots of like homages. There's lots of probably very carefully chosen set design, very carefully chosen locations, music, lots of stuff like that. And even though I wouldn't say that this is like Edgar Wright's best foot forward, and one of the reasons why I brought up Baby Driver is because I've always liked that movie, but there has been, especially around the release of this movie, I saw a lot of stuff where it was like, that movie sucked. And everyone talks about like it's a good movie, and people were like, this movie's just garbage. And I was sort of interested by that, and I was like, I mean, I didn't think it sucked. I thought it was pretty fun. Like, I didn't think it was like, I mean, his best movie is probably like Hot Fuzz. It's probably just Hot Fuzz, right? Or like Shaun of the, it's probably one of his like first two movies. World's End is fine. Scott Pilgrim is pretty funny. There's lots of like visual gags in Scott Pilgrim. It's one of the movies that I kind of use as a distinction between like a superhero movie and a comic book movie. That and like Ang Lee's like Hulk, where like those like Scott Pilgrim and Ang Lee's Hulk, they're like comic book movies. Where something like Iron Man it doesn't pay homage to any sort of like comic book aesthetic. It's just a superhero movie. It's just like it's just a Western, but everyone's in robot suits, right? It's like it's not a there's nothing specific to it that would attach it to kind of like a comic book tradition, as it were. So it's one of those movies that I kind of use as like a comic book. It's a comic book movie. As opposed to a superhero movie, because there's lots of stuff in it. It's very stylized in such a way that would make you think of the source material of a comic book. And so I kind of appreciate that movie. At World's End is like, in my opinion, kind of a mixed bag. I don't super like that movie, even though I guess it could be appreciated as kind of a wrap-up to the Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, Edgar Wright collaborations. Obviously, as the last in the trilogy of those movies. But nonetheless, like Edgar Wright's best movies are probably like his first few movies you could pick out. Baby Driver maybe isn't like, doesn't really hold a candle to like what those movies were, what they like meant for an audience seeing them for the first time. Baby Driver, in my opinion, is just kind of, it's just like slick. It's well put together. There's some good performances in it, I guess. And I like watching. I don't know. Like, I think it's fine. I don't really know what people's like exact criticisms were. If it was like the plot sucked, or like, you know, I don't know, Jamie Foxx is stupid in it, or like, and so Al Gort sucks or whatever. It's like, I don't know what people don't dislike about it, but I was just saying that I saw that there was some dislike. And I think I saw more of what I could maybe guesstimate from those tweets or whatever in this movie, where, I mean, the plot is just like really stupid. Well, it's not really stupid, but it's kind of like underwritten. There's sort of like less to say in this movie than even something like Baby Driver, and certain characters kind of get like lost in they sort of get lost in the kind of extravagance of the visuals. But it seems like the set pieces were really what he wanted you to see. Like, if he wanted you to take one thing from this movie, it was like, I mean, look at how fucking great I can make this sequence. And some of the sequences were pretty cool, I guess, but I think towards the end, it just became like, you know, they were, I guess, like some of the sequences were, you know, fairly, I guess I would have to watch it again to see if I could pick anything else specifically or any sort of other homages. I really just picked up the one from Psycho, but the sequences like built a bricolage of references. It built they effectively compounded on each other as the paranoia ratcheted up, and you got more of a sense of the impending danger, I suppose. The impending danger of the scenario for Anna Taylor-Joy, I suppose. But ultimately, I think it was ineffective at like portraying any kind of emotional impact at the end, because unlike Psycho, I think a lot of stuff was really deflated by how over the top the ending was, and how sort of insane and kind of like insane and silly it got. It was really sillier than it probably ought to have been. The sort of the ghosts of the Johns were kind of were a little bit unnerving at first, but it got used so much and they got turned into such like a video game Resident Evil zombie that it kind of lost a lot of emotional impact for me. But you know, what are you gonna do? Wow, I'm at the end, and I just wasn't wowed, I suppose. And I also thought that the twist was very, very obvious. I thought the twist was insanely obvious because it was very clear that it was pretty clear that her ghost seeing powers, even though she does see her mom at the end when she's ostensibly in London still, she sees her mom at the end, and her mom doesn't come back. Like, I thought her mom would be kind of like a reoccurring player, but I guess her mom really serves as like a kind of subtle way to they didn't expose a lot of this sort of character trait or ability, whatever she had, but I guess for the sake of not insulting our intelligence, but like her mom was just kind of used as a way to like traffic in the you can see ghosts and the ghosts might make you turn crazy type of stuff, which is the entire thing. The entire time you're thinking about it is like, I mean, we all know who Anna Taylor-Joy is. Like, it's very obvious who she is, at least from my perspective. Like, the second I saw Anna Taylor-Joy, I was like, okay, yeah, that's the landlady, and it did turn out to be the landlady, and I was like, yeah, I mean, it was fairly obvious. Like, I didn't pick up on the fact that she murdered the pimp, and that the pimp wasn't the old man. I forget that actor's name. He's been in a lot of stuff. He looks like Alan Arkin, but just like kind of thinner. Rest in peace, Alan Arkin, I suppose. But and also alive. He looks thinner and alive. But yeah, it was very, very strange. Non-twist for me, because I think I called it immediately. I never really lost conviction in it, so if you were supposed to assume that, and then there wasn't really a red herring that she was someone else. The red herring was the guy, the old man, and I didn't pick up that he was the cop instead of the pimp, but I don't know. I mean, him being the cop and not the pimp just sort of solidified the ultimate twist, which was that Anna Taylor-Joy was the landlady and didn't die, right? So it's like, okay, I didn't pick up that she was murdering all these guys, but it's like, okay, you know. And then obviously the Me Too stuff gets a little bit warped because the landlady at the end has a change of heart, doesn't kill the main girl, and kind of like sort of like tries to repent for killing all these guys who like were preying on her, but like it just seemed very strange. Like once the landlady became way too evil, the who to cheer for in the movie became a little bit blurred. And I guess you're supposed to cheer for the people who are entering into an interracial relationship. So, white genocide. It's happening, people. Just look at South Africa. White genocide is real. So, don't let them tell you any different. Yeah. So that was Edgar Wright's movie. And the thing that I really wanted to stress about it is that the set pieces. The set pieces were very extravagant. Again, they sort of fell flat for me, but they were specific, they were tailored, they seemed well thought out, maybe a little bit overproduced in places, like a little bit over-emphasized in terms of their distinction from the rest of the film, but like they were there, they had a purpose, and they seemed fairly well coordinated. I would say well coordinated, like top of the line. Great set pieces when she goes back to the 60s in the visions, or I guess dreams, visions, whatever. When she goes back to the 60s when she's Anna Taylor-Joy. those sequences were very well done and captured, you know, as much thematic significance as you could wring out of this movie. Again, I think that the movie was a little bit like, sort of similar to Baby Driver, a little bit like disloyal to stuff that it was kind of putting forward, but overall well put together, not quite action sequences, but, you know, the sort of like overproduced stuff. Okay, then we're moving on. I'm coming up to the Circle K at this point. I'm coming up on the Circle K, but I am close. I'm close to the Circle K, but after the Circle K, I'm gonna talk about Eternals. And I'm gonna relate it back to the Edgar Wright thing. Because I wouldn't really want to talk about this movie otherwise. I just don't care. Like, I will say off the top, like, the worst, people have sort of been saying this, but, like, easily the worst, I don't know, maybe not the worst Marvel movie, but in terms of, like, I mean, yeah, I would put this as, like, the worst Marvel movie I've ever seen. Like, easily, like, honestly, like, easily. Like, it is really fucking bad. It was, like, worse than, like, I saw, like, Venom, There Will Be Carnage, like, probably, like, a month and a half ago. Like, worse than that movie. And that movie I thought was, like, complete dog shit, like, irredeemable in almost every way. It was just, like, complete dog shit. And this one was, like, somehow ended up being worse. It's like fucking embarrassing. Like, why did they make this movie? So yeah, I wouldn't really talk about it if that was all there was to say. I'd just be like, yeah, it's dog shit, don't go see it. Like, don't watch these movies anymore. You should have stopped watching these movies after you saw that they were gonna run this, like, huge, like, multi-phase series of movies. You should have just been like, yeah, fuck it. Who cares? Like, you should have stopped watching these movies immediately. But if you're still watching them and you think, like, maybe I'll check out what happens after Endgame, it's like, just don't. just stop watching these movies. They're so bad. And I kind of just watched it as something to watch. Like, I just wanted to go see it. I wanted to watch a movie, and I'm saving Dune. I want to watch David Lynch's Dune, and maybe Jodorowsky's Dune, the documentary. I maybe want to watch both of those. I certainly want to watch David Lynch's Dune again, just so I have it fresh in my mind. But yeah, I'm saving Dune. I didn't want to watch Dune, and I watched this fucking movie, Eternals, and it fucking blew chunks. Like, it's like the worst. It's like even like Black Widow. Like, I watched Black Widow and I'm like, okay, this is easily the worst Marvel movie. And it's like, no, they keep topping this shit, man. Like, these movies are so bad. Genuinely, like, there's nothing redeemable about them. They're just fucking awful through and through. And so off the top, I just want to say that it is one of, like, the worst movies I've seen in a long time. So, yeah, we're now at the Circle K. I'm in the gas station area, and we're gonna walk in, and we're gonna kill ourselves. We're gonna self-immolate in the Circle K. Can I have a bag as well? Is that okay? Have a good night. Thank you. Okay, the hall is a fruit, a berry, rather, a berry, Gatorade, bag of M&Ms, and Reese's King Cup with pieces in the middle. That has a vaguely Pan-African font, Hotep font. So, very interesting stuff that we've got going on here tonight, ladies and gentlemen. So, Eternals. So Eternals basically follows a gang of spacefaring explorers sent by Galactus to have sex with each other and also with children, apparently. I don't know, it's fucking stupid. It's kind of a mixture of, like, I guess Moon or like Oblivion. If you saw those movies, one with Sam Rockwell, the other with the latter with Tom Cruise, where it's this gang of, like, I guess they're the Eternals. They all have, like, different powers, which makes no sense. Like, they all have, like, I thought that they would all just be, like, sort of generic, like, Superman kind of guys, like, oh, we can all fly and shoot lasers, and one guy can do that. Who's supposed to be, like, the strongest warrior or whatever, who's the Rob Snow from fucking Rob Snow from, what the fuck is that movie? Show. Game of Thrones. Yeah. And then the other guy, Jon Snow, or I guess it's not Rob Snow, he's Rob, what is he? Baratheon? No. What the fuck? Ned Stark. He's Rob Stark. And it's Rob Stark and Jon Snow. So yeah, Rob Stark is the strongest warrior. They all have stupid names that I couldn't remember, so who fucking cares. He's the Superman guy. He can fly and shoot lasers. And then they all have, like, different individual powers. And they were sent to Earth to defeat bad guys, to defeat demons, and protect humanity, which is like sentient life, from being killed by these bad guys. And they fight the bad guys, and the bad guys are basically all the same. Or they're very easy to kill for these guys or whatever. They're the only people that can kill them, blah, 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 who cares? And then they just, like, after they killed them all in, like, the 1500s, specifically when, like, the Incan civilization is being massacred by the Spanish, they all kind of, like, go their separate ways or whatever. They just, like, exist for the next few hundred years, just chilling, waiting to go back to their home planet, which they believe they've been on, you know, previously. And Selma Hayek's the leader. It's kind of just like, they're just a band of RPG characters. There's, like, the elf rogue trickster who can transform into people. There's the sort of, I think she's she's technically British, I suppose. They all use their like regular accents, which is kind of funny. So it's like a bunch of like, the Rob Stark guy is speaking in a very heavy like Irish accent. But throughout the entire movie, like before they even like, they're in like Mesopotamia and he's like, I can't do an Irish accent, but he's just like, oh crikey. Look at all, I fucking love this Chinese bitch. She's so beautiful, ain't she? Yeah, so the Chinese girl can like, I don't know, change matter from like liquid to solid, or she can just like transmute states of matter, I suppose, or just like influence matter. And it's like, okay, whatever. It's just like useless, except for the end when it's like conveniently not useless. Selma Hayek is like the leader, but she's also like just a healer. Rob Stark is Superman. There's another Chinese guy, Asian guy. I think he's Korean, actually. Oh, wait, no. His name is like... His name was really funny. I'm going to look it up right now. His name, I mean, whatever. It's a Korean name, so it's not really funny. But I'm just saying, it's literally like... This isn't it, but it's really something like when that meme was or when that like image was floating around of that like newscaster guy on his last day who was just like like a Vietnamese aircraft went down, and the names of the pilots were like oof bang ow or shit like that, and just the newscaster like saying that shit. But it wasn't like suck my dick, but it was basically like suck my it was something like that. Fuck. Here we go. It was... No. Yeah, they're all kind of like the guy who can fly is named like Icarus, which is very like, and they make a joke about that, like, oh yeah, when we were in Athens, we told this story of Icarus, and it's like, fuck off. There's also a gay guy for some reason, and a deaf one. It's like Don Lee. No, his name is Ma Don Suk. Yeah, so it wasn't suck my dick, but it was literally his name is Ma Don Suk, and it's like Seok is like his last name. I guess he goes by Don Lee, which is like, you know, fair, because your name is literally suck my dick. But I looked up, I specifically was like, this can't be real, like this is pronounced like Suk or something like that. It's like, no, it's pronounced suck. It's Ma Dong Suk. It's a very funny name. It's a very funny name. Yeah, it's like all those like Vietnamese restaurants that just have the N-word or something in their name, because it's like, what? It's their fucking language, but it's like, yeah, but you gotta know what you're fucking saying. It's very funny. Anyway, yeah, there's a deaf one, and it's like, but it's explained in the movie, because the movie's also like, the script is horrible. Like, the performances are all terrible. I don't know why Selma Hayek is acting anymore, but it's like, all the performances are horrible. All the humor is like completely shitty and awkward. The action is terrible, but I'll get to that later. The script, however, is like just it's a series of flashbacks, right? It's just like constant flashbacks. And you know, I guess I don't really care about that, but I was thinking, like, when they're kind of going through the twist at the end, which is that the Rob Stark, like, Icarus character kills Selma Hayek because Selma Hayek is having second thoughts about the overall plan of why the Eternals are there, which is that what the Eternals do is that they facilitate the birth of like a seed of a celestial, So celestials, like I guess stars, they kind of like burn out. And celestials are basically like, in the Marvel universe, celestials are kind of like the highest, they're top build, as it were. There are things that are like technically over them, which is kind of like reality bending concepts. Like there is a character which is just like, it's just time, right? It's just, there's like time and reality and like, and not stuff that's like, but sort of like anthropomorphized versions of those things, which are not, you know, restricted to like the stones or whatever from Infinity. It's not restricted to the Infinity Stones and whatnot. So there's those things, but then there's also like, but for the most part, in terms of like things that you can maybe punch and kill, celestials are kind of like, you know, you're sort of, that's it. That's all you can kind of, that's as high as you can go. But they kind of burn out like suns, I suppose, because they like, I guess, as it's explained in this mythology, they sort of create universes. They sort of like, they create stars and stuff, and facilitate the growth of life. But they burn out every, you know, billion years or so, and there needs to be more that are made. So what the other celestials do is they plant seeds on planets that can support sentient life. They allow the sentient life to reach a certain point in time, like a certain capacity, and then the life force is subsumed into the celestial seed, and then a new celestial is born, destroying the planet, killing all the sentient life, but then that celestial can go on and make a bunch of other worlds and whatever. So Salma Hayek knows this. The other Eternals, for whatever reason, don't. And Salma Hayek also sort of knows that they're all kind of like androids that this one celestial has created to stop his earlier creation, which are the bad guys. I guess they're called deviants. And again, this is all like very stupid what I'm saying right now, but just to give like context to the movie. The deviants were created by Galactus, who's I guess a celestial. Created by Galactus to, I guess, keep intelligent life curtailed, or they were supposed to like egg them along or something, like something weird. Like I don't exactly know what the fuck they were supposed to be doing, but they just got out of control and they started killing everything. And Galactus sort of lost control of them. So he created the Eternals to fight the deviants, to stop them from killing all sentient life so that the seeds could grow and mature. That's what they're doing unknowingly sort of throughout the whole movie, is sort of like, you know, sheep to the slaughter kind of thing. But in the end, they stop Icarus. He flies into the sun in a very funny scene at the end, because he's like, it's like, you can't like redeem this character even though he had sex with a Chinese bitch and like. But anyway, that was all just to say that all of this is explained in like very stupid flashbacks, and like the movie just bounces all over the place when it really doesn't need to. Like it really could have had like the first like half an hour just be them like living in the past and like growing, and then have like the aftermath happen, which is them in the present day. But it's such a stupid way to write a movie, and it's supposed to feel like more epic, I suppose, like sort of like globetrotting and whatever, but it just feels so lame after you take it in, right? Once you take it in afterwards, it just becomes like, wow, they were in Mesopotamia, and this like incredibly stupid. Also, the movie's like incredibly racist and very shitty to you know, early civilizations and shit like that. They're not supposed to like interfere or whatever, but like it's like, what the fuck do you mean you're not supposed to interfere? Like, they can see your giant spaceship. Like, what the fuck? Oh, no, it's because these brown people that live in, next to the Euphrates, they're retarded and they'll just say that we're gods or something. They're not like smart English rationalists who will understand that, you're not supposed to live forever. It's like, it's so fucking shitty. Yeah, and Angelina Jolie's in it as the mentally incapacitated one of the group. She has like her memories because they're androids, so once they finish, birthing a seed, a new celestial, they kind of get called back to Galactus in his like huge robot forming rig. And they kind of and they just like get their memories wiped and like transferred to his like giant data collection bank so that he can find out a way to defeat the deviants more efficiently, and then he sends out a new team of androids. So she's like getting like memory callbacks from those points. So she's basically like defective. She tries to like kill them all a bunch of times. And her name is literally like, it's not Athena, it's just Thena, which is retarded. But she just has like, she can just create weapons out of light. And it's like, okay. And the gay guy is just smart. And the thing is, what I wanted to mention about I'm getting a little bit off topic here, but what I want to mention about the deaf one is that she's like deaf, right? But it's sort of revealed that she can like, or she just basically, there's this scene where someone's trying to like steal something from her. They're talking about it, and she can like sense the vibrations from when they speak. And that's like something that like you think about for 2 seconds and you're like, wait, what? It's like, yeah, I'm so attenuated to the vibrations in the air that I know when you speak. And you're like, so you can hear? It was very funny. It was very funny, like, what is the point of this deaf character? And then you realize, like, 3 days before the movie came out, they had like a Vanity Fair article or Variety article or whatever, which is like, meet the MCU's first deaf superhero. And it's like, motherfucker, what the fuck? Who cares? First off, that cannot be a minority status. Second off, she's not even deaf in the movie. Like, she can hear. If you can know when people are speaking based on the vibrations of their voice, then you can hear them. What the fuck are you sensing? Like, this is what the mechanics of speech is. You're just describing the mechanics of hearing something. Like, what the fuck? Oh no, actually, I have really good hearing. I have such good hearing that I can't hear anymore. It's like, this fucking shit's so stupid. Anyway, the movie's really bad. The plot sucks. The actors are fucking awful. Everything about it is shitty. Kit Harington, also from Game of Thrones, is in it. He's in it for like one scene at the beginning, one scene at the end. He gets given some like fucking stupid Scottish or Irish or British seal from his Chinese girlfriend, who's the Chinese girlfriend in the movie. And then he's like, I've got something to tell you. And then she gets taken by Galactus, and they all get told that they're like, whatever, Silver Surfers or some stupid shit. So I guess the main villain of this fucking phase of whatever stupid bullshit we're on, I guess that's going to be like Galactus or whatever. And we're going to do the Silver Surfer. We're going to do Fantastic Four. Harry Styles showed up as Star Fox, I guess his name is, with Pip. and there was a Adam the Warlock tease in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, so we're gonna do that whole bullshit again. Who fucking cares? This is all stupid. You shouldn't watch these movies anymore. But what I really wanted to get down to was in connection with Edgar Wright's Last Night in Soho, and me emphasizing how at the end of that movie I was kind of like, wow, there were sort of like, I mean, the set pieces were kind of a little bit empty, a little bit vapid, but like they were sort of impressive. This movie's action sequences were so dog shit. It was one of the things that was kind of emphasized by, I guess, like MCU stan accounts on Twitter or whatever, and people were kind of dunking on them for posting like garbage, like CGI bullshit of like Angelina Jolie spinning around, and then like the connecting cut not even looking like it was from the same movie, where it's like very clear that this is like some kind of CGI amplified stunt double that then cuts to like Angelina Jolie, who just like turns slightly, right? It's like, it's all very like distended and like off-putting and very silly. Which is how a lot of the action scenes actually come off in the movie as well. Like there's lots of movies with like giant, overly designed villains in like wide open spaces, like everything is CGI, very similar to like the Black Widow movie, where like everything is just like obviously CGI. These people are touching nothing, right? They're like floating on the floor and shit. Like, it wasn't necessarily as bad as like the special effects in Black Widow, but this shit was like, it was borderline unwatchable at certain points. Like, and the action scenes did go on for like quite a long time and were very shitty and bad. So, and then I was thinking like, okay, and then I was like, okay, who's Chloe Zhao? And it was a similar thing with Kate Stretland or something. She made a movie, or the person who directed Black Widow is an Australian director. She made a movie. She's like Australian, like German, and she has like Jewish heritage. She made a movie in like 2010 or whatever. It was about like a former, like a daughter of like an SS agent at the end of the war who's trying to get to the front. Who's trying to get to like the American front to kind of like, I don't know, whatever, claim amnesty, whatever, right? Try to stay away from the Ruskies because they're a little bit less conciliatory to the Nazis for good reason. But it was a pretty good movie. It was very like, I guess, like personal. It was very sad at points. It was very like disarming, and kind of lots of questionable things happened in it. Lots of like, you know, it was a good movie. It's a solid movie. I can't think of the name right now. I'll just get to think of the director's name. So there's not a lot to go on, but it's the Black Widow's director. And you look at Black Widow and you're like, yeah, none of that came out in this movie. Like, you could watch that movie, and maybe if you saw another movie similar, you might be like, oh yeah, this is like, I think her name's Kate Shortland. This is like a Kate Shortland movie, right? And it's like, okay, it's like independent stuff. It's a lot of like co-productions, sort of like national cinema stuff, festival things. But she gets picked up. She's like, okay, you're a female director. You've got a vision. You've got a voice. You've got an idea about what females in cinema should do. We want you to direct a Marvel movie. And it's like, great. And it's a female-led Marvel movie. Great. And we want it to look exactly like Captain America. It's like, shit. So, and a very similar thing I think happened with Eternals, where it's like, okay, Chloe Zhao, she did like an independent film. Probably got a lot of festival buzz. Got some eyes on her. Marvel picks her up to direct Eternals. It's like, oh my god. what do you want me to do? And it's like, we want you to make this look like, I don't know, garbage. It's like, it doesn't look, I'm sure that if I watched the Chloe Zhao movie, like her independent movie that was pretty big, I'm sure it would look nothing like this. Like, the performances would be nothing like this. The script would probably be quite original. It would probably borrow from a lot of different sources, and it would probably be a very like well thought out movie with good set pieces and an effective use of a budget. And this movie is just like a distended nightmare that has none of that, and it looks like garbage, and like all the actors look either completely out of it. Like, Angelina Jolie literally, I mean, this is sort of part of her character, but she just looks like she's zanned out the whole movie. Like, she's just on Percocet the entire film. And it's like, what the fuck is going on? It's just, like, you can't call it like a Chloe Zhao movie, right? Like, it's just not, it's not something that you could put that kind of stamp of any kind of authorship on. And then, of course, like, the whole, like, oh, we have women directing MCU movies, it just becomes an obviously, like, cynical and exploitative tactic to get people talking about the movie in a positive light, and having different groups advocate for it for a myriad of different reasons that have nothing to do with the quality of the film or what it means in any kind of industrious sense. It's just like, yeah, see it because the people who you can slap a name on the poster are people that we sort of like generally think of as, we generally think that this is a positive direction for the film industry, even though it represents literally no change, and if there's any change, it's an obvious regression into like a top-down, producer-oriented style of filmmaking that was popular in, like, you know, pre-code in like the big studio Hollywood before the monopoly breakup of the distributors and all that stuff. So, and this seemed to me like very obvious once I watched Eternals. Like, this is like complete bullshit that there's any sort of like authorship connected to this film in any way. And I was also watching like there was a video that I think, like, I wasn't just watching this, I watched this like when Black Panther came out, but there's a video with Ryan Coogler. I think his name's either Coogler or Coogly. I think it's Coogly. It's like a Vanity Fair or something like that. They do a thing with directors where it's like, explain a scene from your movie, right? Like, you know, Martin Scorsese, or not, he's probably wouldn't be Martin Scorsese, but I don't know. Taika Waititi breaks down a scene from Jojo Rabbit, right? And they just go through and they're like, oh yeah, okay, so, you know, we have this actor and he's like tall, so we put him in the center of the frame, and then, you know, we found two actors that were at shoulder length, and he's actually back, a little trick of the trade, he's actually back 2 feet from the other guy because he was actually a little bit taller than we want him to be. We want him to be shoulder height, a little bit of tricks of the trade. This guy's standing on an apple box. Look at that. So stuff like that, right? And the one they did with Ryan Coogler, in Black Panther was the scene in like the sort of Chinese or Korean, whatever, gambling, sort of like the James Bond scene. It was a very similar scene, I believe, in Casino Royale. I think it's like an early scene where it's like a, you know, it's just an elite, high-end gambling joint in the back of a fish shop. They go in, there's like 4 of them or whatever, and they have to fight their way out at some point. And he's just going through like the mechanics of designing a scene like that. And he has like a little diorama and little dolls and whatever, and he's like showing you like, oh yeah, we built this and spent some time. I had this on my desk and we were planning it out and stuff like that. And it's like, okay. And then you sort of look at like what kind of directors and the MCU sort of attracts. What sort of like specialization they're looking for. And then ultimately, like, if you can find any essential difference between the movies vis-a-vis like the directors that make them, that put their names on them, like, what are these people really doing in terms of authorship? And you're like, okay, they're just doing what Ryan Coogler is doing in this video, which is playing with dolls. They're just banging action figures together. right? That's all they're doing, and that's all they're hired to do. It's just like bang action figures together, and you just want like the kids, you want the little baby children who are sitting on the playmat who, you know, maybe put a little effort into banging the action figures together, okay? We want someone with a little bit of a vision on how to play with their action figures, okay? We want someone who's going to take the next step in playing with their action figures, okay? And that's really all they're doing, is they're just planning out these scenes, and they're just sort of developing the filmmaking process of how to bang these action figures together, and the rest in between, the ends and the, you know, the odds and ends of the script and whatever, that's all dealt with by a committee. That's all dealt with by a series of central planners who have a, you know, Ryan or Kevin whatever the fuck his name is, who has like ideas for 600 more movies and a billion different TV shows. And how do we rope in Robert De Niro for, you know, what role do we give Robert De Niro? What role do we get for Martha Stewart? Do we give her the tax fraud Celestial? How do we get Mark Hamill into this? Okay, guys, I want you to dig through the comic books. Give me a Mark Hamill character, and let's give him 48 lines, and maybe he can pull out like a lightsaber-esque weapon, and we can make some sort of cute joke of that in Eternals 6. And it's like, okay, so the filmmaker is really just dead. Like, it's just a person who facilitates the construction of 10,000 man-hours for Korean and Indian CG artists in some like shithole in Seoul, right? It's like, that's all this is at this point. And going back to Edgar Wright, and it's like, okay, maybe Edgar Wright on some level is similar in the Last Night in Soho, but I think like a necessary distinction is that, like, at least you could sort of tell that, like, and what Marvel wanted from him when he was, you know, chosen to direct Ant-Man, is I'm pretty certain that at this point it's like, that's sort of all he realized the job was. And you could say even at that point, but it was probably like from the fucking beginning, like that's what this sort of shit was, right? Is like, you're just deciding on how cool the fight scene is going to be, right? You're the guy who decides how cool the fight scene is going to be. And I'm sure Edgar Wright was like, yeah, I can make some pretty cool fight scenes. Like, I can think of some pretty fun ideas for this movie. Like, you know, this movie's kind of silly. This movie's kind of, you know, it's got Paul Rudd in it. It's got a comedic edge. I'm a comedic guy. I can come up with some comedic fight scenes. And they're like, yeah. And he's like, can I put a scene in there where he, like, can I write this into the script? Like, can I make the character this? Like, I think that the ending would work much better if he's kind of a sullen kind of, you know, like, very trampy sort of character. And it's like, no, we kind of want him to be like a good dad and like redeemable and like sort of a downtrodden kind of guy who's got like a lot against him. It's like, that's not very interesting. Let me do something where he's like actually like a shitty person. And they're like, no, it's like, and again, I'm inventing all this, but I'm assuming like at the level of the script, if he had any sort of suggestions or like tweaks or whatever, all of those were probably thrown out the window in favor of just like, no, we want him to go from point A to point B, and we just want, like, just give us the storyboards. We just need to pass them off to our Korean slaves so that we can get going with this fucking shit. We need this up by Christmas, man. We don't need you talking about a theme. The theme is fatherhood, okay? He's a dad. He's a good dad. He wants to get back to being a dad. And it's like, what? Why? You just have him in the very next movie throw his life away for some bullshit because you want to put him in the movie. Like, why is he a dad in this movie? Like, it's so stupid. It's dumb. The bottom line is that he didn't have any creative control over the entire process. They just wanted him to come in and say, "Oh, we like Scott Pilgrim. We like Hot Fuzz. We want you to make a movie like that, but we want to make it 15 minutes. We want to make it like 15 to 30 minutes, and it's all fight scenes." And he's like, "What?" It's like, yeah, we already have the rest of the movie shot. I mean, it's not hard to find a guy who can point a camera at Paul Rudd. Like, this shit is not that difficult. We just need you to design what the Korean slaves are going to make. And that's all it was. And I just, like, I didn't think that maybe this distinction is incredibly revelatory for anyone. But just for me, it just became a lot clearer that that's what it was. It became a lot more clear that that is sort of at the level that these people operate. And it became more clear that that was probably the line that Edgar Wright couldn't get across. Maybe there are certain directors, James Gunn, Taika Waititi maybe, that have sort of danced on that line a little bit. But even those movies have a homogeneity that clearly shows that the line is quite solid and quite unmovable for the most part. So, you know, Marvel movies suck. They're just complete trash. Especially at this point, I mean, this is like bottom of the barrel shit. Like, they're not even getting likable performances anymore. They're not even getting quality action like, they're not even getting quality like CGI sequences. They're not even getting quality performances out of anyone. It's just like, it's just a complete collapse. House of Cards. And they're still going to be writing these things for years because this shit still makes money. I mean, I don't think Shang-Chi did very well, but I think Eternals did okay. It's probably doing okay, even though it's being like critically panned. I think it's one of like the only Marvel movies to get panned, but yeah, these movies suck. They're so awful, and they're only going to get worse. They are only going to get worse. There's no one to like base it around anymore. There really is just like a vacuum of personality, which I think at least for any kind of like popular base that it had, I think that's what was carrying it for the most part. So, but hopefully I won't see. I mean, I guess Tom Holland, I guess Speedo Man is. I guess Speedo Man is still trucking. They're doing their multiverse thing, which is, it's just painful. It just sucks so fucking bad. It sucks so much ass. It's awful. Anyway, yeah, it's my opinion of those two movies, as well as The Last Duel and French Dispatch. Don't see any movies anymore. Stop watching movies. All movies are canceled for being assets to global imperialism by the Anglo-American state. So stop watching movies. Goodbye.